Hello, everyone. Delighted to be here with this panel. I think when you step back and you look at the story that we're all involved in here, open banking, power to the people, this is what fintech is all about. This is where fintech can go kind of cosmic. And I mean, we drill down a lot into the ways and means and mechanics of how all of this works, but I think it's really great to kind of step back and just look at how the story has really changed. And I'm just delighted that we have some real rock stars in the fintech space who are going to share that with us. And if I may, I'd like to begin with you, Anne. You're in the vanguard of the revolution. Tell us, I mean, has open banking been achieved? Are we there?
No, we're not there. I think the couple of things that are important here. PSD2 was implemented in the UK under the open banking banner. There's a lot of competition inquiries in the UK, which actually led to a whole initiative to mandate the big banks in the UK to open up their APIs under the Open Banking Initiative. And so far, not a lot has happened. I do not think that open banking alone will transform this industry. What will transform this industry is us looking at the value chain in a different way and connecting up parts of the value chain using open APIs that will give consumers the option of shopping around for the best part of that value chain that suits them.
I think most of us are probably steeped in open banking and PSD2 and what it is, but we're in, just for the sake of context, I mean, we're in this really important phase right now of PSD2, which was implemented in January, in which banks are required to really open up and allow themselves to connect through their APIs with fintechs, with other qualified outside firms. How is that process going? And this is great that we have a representative of Deutsche Bank who can speak from the side of the empire, and we have the startups who are more on the rebel side. I'd really like to just kind of share with us state of play on the implementation of the so-called RTS standards on PSD2.
Yeah, I think firstly, when you go back to even the term open banking, right, I prefer to think that the two things that the open actually relates to, going back to Anne's sort of comment, are one, open to competition, two, open to innovation. Therefore, when you want to look at technical standards, you want to be able to satisfy yourself that those two critical principles are met. That it is open to competition as a result, and it is open to innovation. But in doing it, you need to do it in such a way that the sacrosanctness of customer data is protected all the way. Right? It doesn't matter in which industry you are, whether it's in banking or anywhere else. Once you go for a model that says, as with regulations like PSD2, you're exposing or providing controlled access to customer data, the immediate requirement then becomes how do you, talent knows no borders or walls. Innovation knows no borders or no walls. Therefore, the need to be able to partner is extremely valuable if you want to improve competition, if you want to improve innovation.
That's at the heart of the matter.
Yeah.
That's right.
But if you're going to do that, you have to do it safely and securely. Okay. So, even if there is a mandate on us as a bank to be able to open up our data, right, I think the customer requires of us that it is done safely and securely.
Right.
And if RTS is the route to be able to get there, things that we have done like VeryMe, which I can go into later, could not have been possible except for that focus.
But there's been rumblings that in various member states of the EU, some of the banking associations, some of the banks have been dragging their feet on implementing the RTS standards. And even some that might be saying, yes, we have these security issues, and I know, do fintechs see that as an excuse?
I think that the banks have been mandated to implement open APIs under various initiatives. But what we're seeing is not necessarily dragging their feet, but scaremongering. And you can open any sort of newspaper across Europe and you can see people talking about the dangers of sharing your data. Sharing data in a very controlled way, in a very technically advanced way, with people you trust, and then being able to take that permission away is very, very powerful. For many years, banks have used customers' data against them, been used that data to cross-sell and upsell, and that data a customer couldn't take away and use in order to get underwritten at another provider. So what you have under these new legislations is that the fact that the customer is much more in control. But most people out there in the street don't understand, and they don't need to understand what's going on. And therefore, it's up to all of us as an industry and for the media to educate people and not scare them off, because if we scare the vast population across Europe, then we will not get fair competition.
Valentin, do you have a...
So I think you mentioned
the banks dragging their feet?
A couple of things. I think, first of all, I think traditionally banks have not been, or have been very good in logging customers in. So I think traditional banks have been logging in customers for decades, like being intransparent on fees, and that's kind of has been part of the business model. Mm-hmm. So I think PSD2 is, for a startup, is great. It's creating more transparency, and if there is more transparency, in the end, the consumers are the ultimate decider, and they decide where they want to go. So if it's easier to switch bank accounts, the one who has the best app, the best service, the best price will survive and will win the market. And I think the more transparency we have, the better it is. But I also think that PSD2 is not going to change the market. I think there's much more kind of expected from PSD2 than there's actually going to happen, I think.
You mean that its impact is overrated?
Yes. I think if you look at Germany, you can already, access different bank accounts by, like we do it. If you apply for credit within N26 and you just have been with N26 for 2 months and we don't have enough data, you give us the credentials of Deutsche Bank account and we scan your last 2 years, and based on that we do a credit decision. So which is a big part of PSD2 kind of sharing that. So there has been a standard in a lot of European countries, like different standards in the different countries, where you could already share data between banks. So I don't think it's the initiative of PSD2 that will create like things or change things for consumers. I think it needs to be the players on the market. It needs to be N26, it needs to be Deutsche Bank, it needs to be your companies. It's all these companies that need to create the products, and it's there, you can do it now.
So you think the invisible hand of the marketplace will take care of open banking? Is PSD2 even necessary?
So I think PSD2 is definitely something that is good. That if there's more transparency, if there's more transparency for consumers, it's better for consumers. They will be easier to change. They will not be logged in.
Okay.
I think that's always good. If the market is made more transparent, the question is, where does it end? And I think PSD2 is again, and we're facing over-regulation. Yeah, and I think the question is, how much can you regulate? And also PSD2, I think, what actually is regulated, it's not even clear kind of what standards and what APIs are going to be there.
No, that's all in flux right now. I mean, that is the story.
This is all
right
like very in flux. So maybe it's again going into over-regulation. So I don't think that the regulation will solve the pain of the consumers. It's only the startups or innovative companies that can solve it.
I think Valentin's made an important point there. The point is that despite the fact that you have PSD2 and you have open banking, APIs themselves are transformative and actually could revolutionize the way we look at banking. Now, we launched on day one with PSD2 compliant APIs, but the most innovation I'm seeing is that lots of other fintechs are using our payment mechanisms, using our public APIs. So whilst the driving force was to use APIs to facilitate consumers in accessing their data, the big innovation has come that lots of fintechs are coming to us and saying, you have this API to SEPA and faster payments, can we use it because we want to use your rails? So what we have is more the API revolution rather than the PSD2 or the open banking revolution.
So that cross-pollination is going to have major impact. Okay.
Yeah. I think that, whether you look at, say, the networks of the ATMs and how they evolved, whether you look at telcos going back maybe 90 or 100 years, what you have to appreciate, and this goes back to, PSD2 is necessary but not sufficient, that the API setup is critical to saying, how did open happen? Because people believed in the value of platforms, in multi-sided platforms. Yeah. I remember the first time, I was part of a hackathon at Deutsche. A Saturday, Sunday, when we released a set of APIs, right, there were 30 startups, right, all through the period, and they weren't there because they were competing against each other. They each had a vision for how they wanted to improve the customer experience. And we liked what happened so much that we are working closely with those startups as a result. But the premise behind it, which I want to, we go back to your RTS question and goes back to whether PSD2 had an impact or not. At one level of abstraction, you can say it gave us all impetus to focus greater on the APIs, because people were beginning to think about that, but how did it actually get momentum?
So there was an impetus among the incumbents, among the Deutsche Banks of the world.
But it's not just that impetus, but that if you really want to create, you made the point earlier about it being not necessarily even across different jurisdictions, okay? Interoperability takes place because you solve for a network and then you learn how to connect that network to other networks. And it is, heavy lifting. It's block and tackle work. You don't get standards and protocols agreed, even in their simplest form, without actually doing the hard yards, okay? And if we're really going to talk about, I agree completely with Anne saying there are many things the customer may not be needing to know about. But it has to be done, Even making statements like, the rails had to have access, we had to get into SEPA. Okay? There may be many customers who don't even know what SEPA is. Okay? And that is where the value comes to me.
So, but I think for me, the discussion is not even about PSD2 or not. It's about how is the bank of the future going to look like. I think we, the N26, see the bank of the future much more as a problem solver. And a problem solver, you can only solve problems if you understand your customers. And that means you need to have kind of the necessary data to analyze that in an efficient way. Because I think the retail banking, as it was happening, going to a branch, is very hard to maintain on a normal cost level. So I think the solution to affordable banking in the future is going to be a good data set, fueled by your data coming out of PSD2, but maybe other data sources. The close connection to the customers over the smartphone, and the use of AI, putting all that together and creating an interface as an individual for all of our customers. So today, if an N26 customer uses N26, they basically have the same interface. I think in 2 years from now, I think every interface for every our customers will look different. So depending on your financial state, have you founded a family? Do you need money? Do you have too much money? So I think that's kind of how it's driving. And the more data you can get, the more transparency you can create, is obviously great for customers because they're going to have more choice.
I think the open API concept actually provides the mechanism to have plug-and-play banking. We could see the value chain totally breaking up. We could see the situation where the people controlling, the organizations controlling the customer interface is separate from the organizations controlling the account. We could have certain combinations of the value chain plugging together in different ways, and the connectors are those APIs. And the question is, in this world where the consumer can actually pick which part of the value chain is appropriate for them. And well, you also have new entrants coming into the market that allow this to happen. What role does a traditional bank take?
Well, I think that there's a galaxy of apps and payment services and cards. There's just been this kind of Cambrian explosion of this in the last 2 or 3 years. You put yourself in the shoes of the consumer, it could look like mass confusion. And one thing that I always wonder about is how does this get clarified? How does this confusing marketplace get clarified? And we hear the term aggregation, and there's aggregator companies. And my question is, aren't the banks, which still have enormous brand equity, which still have enormous loyalty, which still have the regulatory relationship, aren't they in the best position to be those aggregators and bring order to this chaotic universe?
I think it takes some nerve to be in a big, successful bank and start selling your competitors' products. You can imagine yourself in the boardroom where, somebody in Barclays says, I know, let's sell an HSBC mortgage or something.
Is that what it's going to take for them to do that, though?
I think it's going to be very, very difficult for them to come to terms with that. At Starling, and many people in this industry now are talking about marketplaces, and we have a marketplace where we provide products from other providers on other people's brands, on other people's balance sheets, and we consume their APIs, and they consume ours, and we provide an integrated service. But that's easier for a disruptor. Because we are not offering those products. We are not threatened by providing a competitor's products. You'd have to be very brave.
But what about strategic partnerships?
But I think
we heard Christo this morning talk about TransferWise's. They were the ones that were going to overthrow everything, and now all of a sudden they're partnering with banks. Like, what's going on?
But I think there's a big myth. I think the trust is not with the banks. I mean, look at the studies. I think people like to go more to the dentist than they go to the bank branch. So I think you have to be fair. Yeah, I think that's what the banks always play, that the trust is with the banks. I don't think so. I think the NPS of all the fintech startups, if you look at TransferWise, if you look at Lemonade in the US, if you look at us, if you look at a couple of successful fintech startups in Europe, the NPS is much higher than the NPS of the banks.
The net promoter score.
Yeah, the net promoter score. And I think, and the question is, where's the value created in the future? I think the value is created by the trust, and it's not by selling products, because banks are always thinking about selling. It's not about selling. It's about advice.
Banking has always been about trust, okay?
Yeah, but it's about advice.
To think that banking is about money is missing the point of the bank. The term bank comes from a bench people sat on, a banco. The term bankruptcy comes from the breaking of that bench. The banco was rutto. Credit comes from credere, belief. So the essences of banking have always been about trust. Okay? You took the point about saying, what is the bank of the future? What is banking of the future? And Anne has been talking about looking at the customer and simplicity and what they want. And first time I met you, that's very much what your focus has been. To do that, unless you start with the premise that you have an idea of what frictions you're trying to remove from the bank, from the way the bank is represented to the customer, you have to understand what the customer wants. When I mentioned to you earlier about this thing called Verimi, okay? Mm-hmm. At the heart of trying to deal with the digital world, when message plus security plus identity equals payment, settlement, clearing, okay? Now, many things that we used to do in an analog term is just a secure message with identity. Well, you've got to start with identity. Right? Anyone who's worked in any corporation and known the problems of single sign-on not being there has the same proliferation problem that you mentioned with apps. Okay? Getting identity solved is a friction that needs to go. Associating that identity with saying, how do you engage with digital assets, the credentials that you need to play with. Moving from that to saying, how do you actually deal with your own digital assets, right down to your data?
You're saying, JP, that the banks are steeped in this. They've been doing it for generations.
And I think
absolutely,
we're always tending to over-complex. Like, everything is very complex, and it's banking. Everybody's afraid.
Identity
in the end,
is not
everything
complex,
is really easy. Yeah? In the end, most of the people in here have the same needs. Yeah, they want to have a bank account, transparent. They want to get cash at an ATM. They want to pay cashless. When they have too less money, they want to get a credit. When they have too much money, they want to save it, get a return. That's basically it. That's like 99%, 95% of everything you need. And the rest is sales. So I think, and this reducing this complexity, giving people the choice, simplicity, I think that's what it is. And I think it's not more complex because of fintech startups, because if you look at all the startups that are there, they have simplified processes. Like TransferWise, international transfer takes you 5 minutes. If you do it with an end-to-end 6, you can use 15 currencies in 5 minutes with like a fifth of the fees. Yeah, so I think it's all about simplifying. Yeah?
Anne?
I spent 30-odd years in traditional banking. I ran technology departments. My last job before I started Starling was Chief Operating Officer of AIB across the road. I came to the conclusion that defending a broken business model and trying to deal with all the complexities of the past was too difficult. And all of a sudden, I realized that consumers had changed. Consumers were embracing technology in a new way. They wanted transparency. They wanted to be able to, they wanted to trust their bank in a new way. And it is first time possible by using new technology to build something that's compelling. We now have a group of fintechs, some of them banks, some of them not, that are coming together to actually create a new financial system, coming together to satisfy needs in a whole new way.
But that's the vision. That's chapter 1 of the story. We're at the end of that chapter. Now we're in the mechanical, all right, let's see it happen phase. Valentin,
I think what is very important is, that's not a vision, it's happening now. So it's about execution. Yeah. It's about, I think what we're doing is nothing that is hidden or a secret. Yeah, I mean, what I said is like the needs of everybody, transparency, having a great bank account that you can easily use, no fees, transparency. That's not a secret. Yeah, what we do is not a secret. You can download our app, look at it. You can try to copy it. Yeah, so it's not a secret. It's more than it's execution. But I mean, I used maybe the last 20 seconds because I wanted to also do a small announcement today, where it's all about execution. So N26, we are all based in Berlin so far. So we have the biggest, we have a bigger
and you've
office
shunned London, is my understanding.
Yeah, and we're shy of London. But we have an office about 400 people in Berlin today, but we're announcing today that we're also opening an office in Barcelona. And we'll open a tech up there, a couple of hundred people, hopefully by the end of next year.
Is there really any work going to get done in Barcelona? I mean, be honest. Is that really a wise decision?
We want to be a global employer, so it's about the cities that have the best life quality. And so Barcelona and Berlin is great.
Right. One element there, very quick.
Okay, very quick.
When you talk about things not happening, and you accept open banking is about open, it's not just about PSD2, what you have to recognize is when you have half your customers, and they're measured in the tens of millions, already having primarily digital relationships, being on mobile, and doing what Anne referred to, at least within what I know of Deutsche, to be able to say you can send money from Bank A to Bank B, and neither of those two banks is Deutsche because you have to get the facility to do that. So multi-vendor, multi-provider capabilities, open access. The app is not the difficult bit. Those are the simple bits. But getting traction...
I think it's the difficult bit.
But getting the traction for getting 12 million customers using that app is the difficult bit because you've got to get the experience right.
All right, well, I think we're going to say one final thing.
All right, one final thing.
We have some very
We'll continue. We'll have lunch, and everybody should join us.
Okay, but one thing. We have a situation where some very, very interesting things are happening. They're raising customer expectations, lowering pricing. The battle is not going to be about innovation. All the big banks will copy all the interesting things that are happening on the smartphone. The question is going to be, can the big banks shrink fast enough to continue to be profitable?
Okay. Well, I told you we'd get cosmic on this panel, so I think that's a very good note to end on. Please thank our panelists.